Welcome everyone to my Diluc guide. Over the past few patches, Diluc has received some massive indirect buffs, so in this guide, I'm going to explain how to take advantage of all of them and make Diluc as strong as possible. Without further ado, use the chapters as you see fit, and let's start off with Diluc's kit. First up with his normals, they're your normal set of Claymore attacks. You'll be using them as you apply Hydro on enemies with either Yelan or Xingqiu, or using them as you wait for enemies to be affected with Cryo for Melt. However, you'll notice that oddly, Diluc has a remarkably high scaling plunge attack. So high in fact that it rivals the plunges of characters that are actually meant to plunge attack. This makes Diluc the perfect candidate to be paired with Xianyun. She'll enable for Diluc to jump high in the air and then plunge attack, which is incredibly significant since now instead of using his normals, Diluc will plunge, doubling or even tripling his DPS output. And I will also be covering Diluc's plunge attack build, so for the sake of clarity, I will refer to Diluc's non-plunge attack build as his reaction build, and his plunge attack build as simply plunge build. Next up comes his elemental skills, and this is Diluc's most important ability, depending on what you're building. It's a set of 3 skill attacks that you'll need to repeatedly trigger, and this is where most of Diluc's damage will come from if he will not be plunging. This is the ability that you'll want to be triggering Vaporize or Melt with. The other ability that you'll be using for reactions is Diluc's Burst, which now let's talk about. When cast, Diluc will fire a Phoenix against enemies, dealing a strong hit to enemies initially, and then additional mini hits as the Phoenix continues to fly. The additional hits have the ability to push enemies far away from you, so do be mindful of that. The value of Diluc's ultimate is its good scaling, dealing out a strong reaction hit, but its value is also in its increase to Diluc's damage, whereby when you use his skill, he'll gain 20% pyro damage bonus, and his normal attacks will gain pyro infusion. The damage percent is very nice, but the infusion of his normal attacks is especially great. Now Diluc will perform even more melts and vapes, raising his DPS output considerably. Bearing all this in mind, I'm gonna break down some effective combos for each of the builds. For a plunge build, you can simply spam Diluc's plunges. This is simple, effective, and something you really cannot go wrong with, but a big downside of it is that Diluc does miss out on the 20% pyro damage that comes from his burst, leaving a good portion of damage on the table. To fix this, you can plunge attack 3 times, use his burst, and then plunge another 2 times. I especially recommend this rotation if you're playing Menceit Lolly, since it fits perfectly with their cryo application. For those playing in his normal reaction build, a very good combo is Diluc's burst, then a normal attack followed by a skill 3 times. This rotation is great for vape. For melt, not so much. Diluc's rotation changes a pretty good bit, depending on who you're running in your team. I found his best rotation to be from his skill, followed by his burst, and then 2 skills. Now, you can make this rotation even better by mixing in 2 normal attacks before Diluc's final skill for 2 extra melts, but from what I know, this requires even more cryo application, which will come from Kazuha's burst, but I don't know, I can't do this. Maybe I'm a bot, I can't get the hang of it. I've tried multiple times, so I just stick to the simpler version I first mentioned. Before I move on, I need to mention something very important, that though these are Diluc's best rotations, they will be affected by his constellations, which I will talk about in his very important constellation section, so be sure to watch that. On to talents. When you're leveling reaction Diluc's abilities, first prioritize leveling his skill, next prioritize both his burst and his normals. With plunge Diluc, you want to first level his normal attacks since his plunges do fall under his normals. As for his skill and burst, to be honest, they're really not that important. It really depends on your rotation and whether you decide to use them. You could ignore them if you really want to, but to be safe, I'd recommend to at least level them to level 6. On to Diluc's weapons. This is an aspect of Diluc that has received some really big improvements. New Claymores have released that really shake up his ranking of weapons, so I'll cover the new Claymores in addition to the old ones and rank them all based on strength. First up, Reaction Diluc has a new best Claymore, and it is Mawika's 1000 Blazing Suns. This Claymore is absolutely amazing. It's so good that even I, someone that vowed to never pull on the weapon banner, tried to get it. I didn't end up getting it, but still, it literally gives you everything you'd want. It gives huge attack as well as both crits. So in every regard, Diluc is massively improved. He'll crit more and deal a lot more damage doing so. Behind the Blazing Suns are the old but reliable Red Hornstone Thresher and the Beacon of the Reed Sea. The performance of these two were actually very similar, so I'm grouping them together, and of them, you should use whichever of the crit stats you need the most. Then comes the classic Wolf's Gravestone, followed by the Unforged. Then came in Kenichi's signature, the Fang of the Mountain King. Though this Claymore ranked lower than the rest, it's still a good Claymore to use if you have it. Similarly, after the Mountain King came the Verdict. It's also a great Claymore, but it is limited by its passive, which requires Diluc to gather Crystallize and thereby run Geo characters, which, aside from Shilonen, Diluc doesn't really want Geo characters in his team. Next up for 4 stars, still the best 4-star Claymore is the Serpent Spine. Thanks to its crit and damage percent, it's still phenomenal and dealt the highest DPS. Now, if you don't have the Serpent Spine, it's no problem at all, especially if you have the best Claymore after the Serpent Spine, the Milled Flower. Though the Milled Flower lacks any sort of crit, it's exceptional because it provides attack and DM, both of which are crucial to Diluc's damage. A weaker version of the Milled Flower, but still strong and vaporize, is the Range Slasher. Last but not least is the Tidal Shower or Earth Shaker. The two performed incredibly close, so they take the same spot, followed by the Luxurious Sea Lord at last. As for Plunge Diluc's top weapon choices, once more the 1000 Blazing Suns performed the best out of all Claymores. However, the Red Horn was remarkably a very close second to the Blazing Suns. This time around, the Beacon did worse than the Red Horn, coming in at 3rd, but still it's by no means a bad Claymore for Plunge Diluc. Behind this, yet again the Wolf's Gravestone and the Unforged, the Milled Flower, the Serpent Spine, and the Fruitful Hook. Surprisingly, after all these options, placed Kenichi's signature, but this is actually to be expected since Kenichi's weapon is primarily for skills and bursts. After it are purely 4 stars, the Tidal Shadow, the Rain Slasher, and again the Sea Lord. For those of you just starting out in the game, you can equip the Blood Tainted Greatsword for some good EM, or the Debate Club for extra attack and a better passive. Before we discuss Diluc's artifacts, I'd appreciate it if you could take a quick second to like the video and possibly subscribe. It helps me out immensely and I'd be very grateful. Back to the video, let's get into the best artifact sets to use on Diluc. Now, there are a lot of sets that are applicable to him, but not to worry, I've ran the numbers and tested all of them, and I'll rank them again in terms of damage. Starting with Reaction Diluc, the set that dealt the absolute highest damage is Crimson Witch of Flames. Even though it's very old, it still remains as his best artifact because of its big increases to reaction damage and pyro damage bonus. In second place, close to Crimson Witch, was 4 Gilded Dreams. This is thanks to the tons of attack and EM Gilded Dreams grants, which again are very important for Diluc. In third place is probably a set that will surprise you all. In fact, it's not even a complete set, but a combination of two pieces that increase pyro damage, attack, and EM. While lacking any big reaction damage or pyro buffs, if you have a really good subsets on these 2 sets, they actually perform very close to Crimson Witch. Finally comes Mehachose Hunter. This set is only applicable if you use Diluc with Farina, but even so, it is viable if you got a very good set. As for the strongest sets for Plunge Diluc, the very best set is the new Long Night's Oath. It beat out every other set by a great margin, and this is due to the massive plunge attack bonus the set gives, maxing out at 100%. But a crucial thing you need to understand with this set is its big reliance on stacks. You do not always have the 100% damage bonus. Instead, you need to build stacks with his plunges and skill to build up towards that 100% damage bonus. Even so, as mentioned, this set is still more than worth it, but it's not as restricted as the next artifact set, which oddly enough was 2 Long Night's Oath and any Elemental Mastery 2-piece. After this came Mehachose Hunter, and this set is actually quite a peculiar one. It won't net you the highest plunge attack damage out of all sets, but the big thing about it is that because it gives so much crit rate to Diluc, Diluc will crit more often, so over time, he will deal more damage than with the next sets, like the Desert Pavilion. It has a nice 40% plunge damage bonus, but you do have to use Diluc's charge attacks, which it is pretty awkward to do, but still, it's a viable set. And then finally comes any set with pyro damage and attack. For any of you in early game, the best artifacts for you will be any mix of Sojourner, Braveheart, Berserker, Instructor, and Gambler. Onto main stats, for both builds, you will run either Elemental Mastery or Attack Percentage for the Sands. I highly recommend that you use Elemental Mastery because it's going to yield you a lot more damage than with Attack, as you can see here. This is because Diluc already has a great source of attack through Bennett, and because naturally, since we're going for reaction damage, EM buffs this very thing, so it's going to be better. This is not to say you absolutely cannot use attack. If Bennett is for some reason not in your team, then you can go for attack, but if you're trying to deal the max amount of damage possible, Benny will be with you and EM is going to be the best. After this, use pyro damage for the goblet and either crit rate or crit damage as the circlet. When you're leveling up artifacts, aim for the substats of both crits, elemental mastery, and attack. Alright, let's now talk about Diluc's Constellations, and this is a very important aspect of Diluc, as this is a big way of raising Diluc's DPS outside of Diluc's weapons and his kit. So first up, with his first constellation, it's a nice and simple constellation that increases his damage to enemies with HPs above 50%. Next up with the second, it's another one of Diluc's good constellations. Upon taking damage, his attack and attack speed will increase to a max of 30 and 15%. 30% is very nice, so oddly enough, getting hit isn't actually that much of a bad thing. This buff also occurs if Diluc is shielded. Now onto a very big constellation, Diluc's C4. This constellation is very important, as this is the one that will change how you play. What it does is that if Diluc uses one of his skill and then uses another of his skills right after, that second skill use will deal 40% increased damage. The damage difference of this is quite noticeable, and as such, it is something you probably should take advantage of if you have C4. I recommend that you use this buff on the third hit because it deals the highest damage. If you're vaping, you want a normal attack to apply hydro, use his skill, and then normal attack twice, followed by 2 skills right after each other. For Melt, the combo is pretty similar to what I last mentioned, but you do want to make sure you use 2 of his skills quickly to make use of the extra damage. On to his final, C6. It significantly improves his normal attacks, whereby the next 2 normal attacks used after his skill will have their damage and speed increased by 30%, plus using his skill will no longer reset the combo of his normals, so you can finally make use of the higher scaling normal attacks. This constellation oddly reinforces the original skill combo we last mentioned, where you just do normal skill, normal skill, normal skill. So if you have C6 and you like the simplicity of the combo, you can go back to it. Last and absolutely not least, let's go over the best new teams for Diluc. There's one team I'm especially proud of, which is my favorite for Diluc, but before I get into that, let's talk about Diluc's best team, a Melt Plunge team. I really love this team, and the reason why is because Diluc feels so good to play in it. Here you got Shen Yin, who as mentioned is amazing with Diluc, enabling him to plunge attack. Diluc feels incredibly good to play in this team. His DPS numbers are insane, so insane in fact that even though he was released in 1.0, he legitimately feels like a Natlan character. With all the 200Ks and sometimes even 300Ks, he effortlessly deals to enemies. There's also a vape version of this team, which is also very good, but enough about this team setup. Let's move on to the next, and it's a vape team for reaction Diluc. The team includes Farina, who I'm sure you all know is an exceptional buffer. I found good results pairing her with Benny and Yelan. Now, you can absolutely just have Farina as the one Hydra unit in your team, and as a result, replace Yelan with Shalonen using Cinder City. But back to Farina, her being the sole Hydra unit can lead to problems. Sometimes she applies enough Hydra for Diluc, other times she doesn't, so to be safe we're running Yelan. But Yelan herself is also really good, so we're really not missing out by playing her. Not only does the duo of Yelan and Farina deal very high damage, they buff Diluc very nicely with their buffs. Now to my favorite team, it's a Diluc Melt team with Citlali. Here, similar to Plunge Diluc, Diluc's attacks are very high in damage, and this feels so nice to do. Diluc is finally in his element, he's using all of the abilities he was meant to use, and all of them are incredibly strong, in a Melt team no less. This is all thanks to Citlali. She's absolutely the crown of this team, and a major upgrade to him. Citlali applies so much cryo, enabling Diluc to hit for 200k and close to 300k. Well everyone, this is my Diluc guide. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing. These things would really help out the channel and would mean a lot to me. Be sure to ask me any questions you have on Diluc, and thanks for watching.